You might think that Chinese noodles are simply different versions of the same food. Change the sauce, change the toppings, change the shape, and that is all. But the reality of Chinese noodle is far more complex than you might imagine. In Guangzhou, people sit astride a thick bamboo pole, using their entire body weight to press down on a lump of dough. In Shanxi, people wield a curved knife, sending slices of dough flying into boiling water like silver fish darting through the air. In Wuhan, noodles are heated in boiling water for no more than 7 seconds before being handed to customers rushing on their way. These noodles look different, taste different, and are even made in completely different ways. So what forces caused the same kind of noodle dish to evolve into such completely different forms? In Guangzhou, one of China's most prosperous cities today, there is a bowl of noodles that looks ordinary but is anything but. The noodles are as thin as Italian angel hair pasta, tangled together in a bowl of crystal clear broth. But the moment you take a bite, you realize that the texture is nothing like its delicate appearance suggests. It does not have the dense chewiness of pasta, but a clean, light, crisp springiness. The rich aroma of duck egg blends with the savory broth, making the noodles thin but never soft, light yet remarkably strong. These are Jook-Sing noodles. And yet, these exceptional noodles, which demand an extremely strong gluten structure, were born in one of the least suitable places for making wheat noodles. Guangzhou lies in the hot, humid south of China, a region crisscrossed by rivers where rice has always been the dominant crop. For a very long time, there was no real tradition of growing wheat here at all. So how did a southern city with no deep-rooted noodle tradition create something so distinctive? In ancient China, the Central Plains in the north were the agricultural heartland, while the south was still considered a remote and largely undeveloped region. That changed when war and political upheaval forced tens of thousands of people from the Central Plains to leave their homes and migrate south. They brought northern farming knowledge with them, and they helped spread northern grains and noodle culture throughout the south. They ground wheat into flour and tried to recreate the noodles they remembered from home. But the reality dealt them a heavy blow. The flour produced from wheat grown on this land made dough that lacked sufficient strength and elasticity, making it impossible to create the noodles they knew from home. After repeated attempts, they finally realized that the problem was not their technique, but the material itself. Wheat is a crop that prefers cool, dry climates. The colder, drier environment of northern China is better suited to producing wheat for noodle making, creating dough that can be stretched into shape while maintaining its elasticity. But the warm, humid conditions of the south gave local wheat different characteristics, making traditional stretching and rolling methods difficult to reproduce. To make good noodles, they would have to rebuild the structure of the dough. The noodle makers began by adjusting the amount of water. They discovered that too much water made the dough soft, sticky, and prone to falling apart, while too little water made it impossible to bring the flour together. Since water could not solve the problem, the people of Guangzhou replaced it with beaten duck eggs. They cracked the duck eggs into the flour, using the protein-rich egg whites to bind the loose flour particles tightly together. You might wonder, why duck eggs rather than the more common chicken eggs? The first reason was cost and environment. The rivers and the waterways surrounding Guangzhou created ideal conditions for raising ducks, making duck eggs plentiful and inexpensive. But the more important reason lay in the unique physical properties of duck eggs. Duck egg whites are thicker and more adhesive than chicken egg whites. When mixed into the dough, they act like a thick glue, forcing the loose, low-gluten flour to bind together and allowing it to be rolled extremely thin and cut into extremely fine strands. And the moment the noodle enter boiling water, the proteins in the dark egg whites help them maintain a more stable structure. It is almost as though the noodles have been given a waterproof coat, preventing the boiling water from cooking them into mush. This gives the noodles an exceptionally springy, crisp texture, a clean snap with every bite that chicken eggs simply cannot produce. Although the duck eggs transformed the structure of the flour, they also created an entirely new problem. Without water to lubricate it, the dough became extraordinarily dry and hard, making it impossible to knead thoroughly by hand alone. To conquer this stubborn mass of dough, people turned to the strong, flexible bamboo that grew throughout southern China. The noodle maker anchored one end of a bamboo pole, set astride the other, and repeatedly pressed the dough using leverage and the weight of his body. As the bamboo pole pressed down and sprang back again and again, it squeezed out the empty spaces inside the dough, binding the egg whites and flour more tightly together. But the more tightly the dough was compressed, the harder the noodles became to cook through. So the makers had to roll the dough as thin as paper and cut it into strands as fine as hair. Only noodles this thin could cook through in just over 10 seconds of boiling water while maintaining the ideal texture. This was how Jook-Sing noodles were born. These noodles were not created simply for the sake of being different. They were the result of Guangzhou's people reshaping dough with duck eggs, bamboo poles, and the precise knife work. The land determines the material, but technology can change what that material ultimately becomes. If the people of Guangdong changed the dough, then in Shanxi it was the tool that had to change. A whole lump of dough is held in one hand as a curved blade rises and falls at incredible speed. Slices of dough fall into the boiling water like leaves. These are Shanxi knife-shaped noodles. Each knife-shaped noodle is thick in the center and thin along the edges, shaped like a willow leaf. Once cooked, the noodles are firm and springy, served with a rich meat sauce or a sweet and tangy tomato topping. They are smooth, chewy, simple, and deeply satisfying. The first time you see knife-shaped noodles being made, you might wonder. China has many traditional methods of making noodles. They can be rolled, cut, or stretched. So why did the people of Shanxi choose to shave them directly from the dough with a knife? Was there something wrong with the flour here, just as there was in Guangzhou? Of course not. Shanxi lies in northern China with abundant sunlight and long, cold winters. This climate is extremely well suited to growing wheat, producing flour with exceptional elasticity. But the real problem was that there was too little farmland and never enough wheat to feed everyone. Most of Shanxi lies on the Loose Plateau, a landscape carved by ravines, plagued by drought, and desperately short of fertile farmland. During a dry year, the wheat harvest could collapse. To feed more people with limited land, the people of Shanxi began mixing wheat flour with drought-resistant local grains such as sorghum, oats, and buckwheat. This allowed their precious wheat supplies to last longer while preserving the familiar texture of wheat noodles. But the more mixed grain they added, the greater the new problem became. These grains lacked the gluten proteins found in wheat. Adding them in large quantities disrupted the wheat's original protein network, causing the dough to crumble and crack easily. Traditional noodle making techniques simply stopped working on this dough once it lost its gluten strength. Faced with a stiff dough that could not be stretched, rolled, or cut in the usual way, the people of Shanxi began rethinking how a noodle could be formed. Since the dough could neither be stretched nor rolled thin, they simply kneaded it even stiffer, and held it directly in one hand. Then they picked up a curved blade and shaved the dough, one slice at a time, straight into a pot of boiling water. This single cutting motion bypassed every traditional step, allowing the dough to take shape the instant it flew into the boiling water. This is how Shanxi knife-shaved noodles came into being. Today, throughout the streets and alleys of Shanxi, knife-shaved noodles remain the undisputed star of the lunch table. Topped with a spoonful of rich minced pork, splashed with aged vinegar, and eaten with a clove of raw garlic, this has been a hearty meal for generations of Shanxi people before heading out into the cold for a long day of work. Knife-shaved noodles were never created to be flashy or to show off culinary skill. They were simply a practical solution invented long ago by people living on poor land and trying to fill empty stomachs. When the dry land could no longer provide the ingredients for good noodles and the old methods stopped working, the people of Shanxi did not give up. They simply picked up a curved knife and found another way to make them. Geography and climate determine what people are initially able to eat, but people everywhere find their own way to put down roots in the land. If the people of Guangzhou use technology to tame an imperfect material, and the people of Shanxi use the curved blade to break through the limits of their dough, then in Wuhan, people use the bowl of hot, dry noodles to take control of time itself. Every morning, as tens of thousands of people rush to work, the hot, dry noodle stores lining the streets enter the busiest moment of their day. The vendor grabs a handful of noodles prepared in advance, drops them into boiling water, then pulls them out 6 or 7 seconds later and adds the sauce. Before the customer has even finished paying, the bowl is already sitting in front of them. Thick sesame paste clings tightly to every strand, delivering a deep, rich sesame flavor and noodles that are firm and springy with every bite. So, how can just a few seconds in boiling water produce noodles with such extraordinary firmness and elasticity? What method allowed people to prepare this bowl of noodles so quickly? In many parts of China, noodles require nothing more than flour, water, and salt, and the rule is to cook and eat them immediately. But in Wuhan, that rule completely failed. Located where two great rivers meet, Wuhan is wrapped in hot, humid air year-round. Once ordinary raw noodles are exposed to the air, they quickly absorb moisture and stick together, turning sour and spoiling within half a day. To fight the heat and humidity, the people of Wuhan found their first solution adding food-grade alkali to the flour. The alkaline water acted like a powerful strengthening agent, locking the loose gluten network firmly together and making the noodles exceptionally dense and firm. This prevented the noodles from easily absorbing water and collapsing into a sticky mass, allowing them to last longer in the oppressive heat. These became known as alkaline noodles. But adding alkali could only delay spoilage. Given enough time, the noodles would still go bad. So the vendors took another step. They boiled the freshly cut noodles until they were about 80% cooked, quickly pulled them out, tossed them with heated oil, and shook them apart in the air to cool. The partially cooked noodles would no longer continue fermenting and turning sour, while the oil acted like a protective film, sealing in their moisture. This process allowed the noodles to be stored for much longer. Although people had solved the problem of preservation, they still ate the noodles as they always had in a steaming bowl of soup. Then an unexpected accident changed this traditional way of eating them. According to legend, sometime in the 1930s, a vendor selling noodle soup left a batch of pre-oiled noodles sitting on his counter just as he did every day. But in the middle of the rush, he accidentally knocked over a container of sauce, spilling the thick sauce all over the noodles. The vendor could not bear to throw them away, so he decided to make the best of the mistake. He mixed the noodles thoroughly with the sauce and sold them directly to passers-by. And that was how a hot noodle dish without soup came into existence. The story may be only a legend, but it captures a real transformation. The people of Wuhan stopped serving their noodles in broth and created a new dry mixed style. But what truly caused this new way of eating noodles to spread rapidly was the accelerating pace of life in Hankou. In 1858, after losing the war, the Qing government signed the Treaty of Tianjin, and Hankou was designated a treaty port. In 1861, Hankou officially opened to foreign trade. In 1906, the railway connecting Beijing and Hankou was completed. On one side, foreign merchant ships were docking in Hankou. On the other, trains from northern China were arriving in the city. What had once been a commercial town became a massive transportation hub linking river routes with the railway. Tens of thousands of dock workers, porters, and rickshaw pullers gathered here. For them, breakfast had to be affordable and filling, but it also had to be fast. A bowl of scalding noodle soup had to be eaten slowly, and a bowl filled with broth was hardly practical to carry while rushing to work. But the pre-cooked alkaline noodles needed only to be reheated quickly in boiling water before being mixed with seasonings and eaten on the move. These dry mixed noodles required no waiting and could be picked up and eaten while walking. They perfectly met the needs of Hankou's workers. In a city driven forward by steam power and river winds, the people of Wuhan moved the time-consuming preparation into the night and reserved ultimate speed for the morning. From the frantic race against time on the old docks to the everyday sight of people eating while walking through today's streets and alleys, a bowl of hot, dry noodles has done more than fill the stomachs of countless families. It has allowed the people of Wuhan to take complete control of their own rhythm, even during the most hectic hours of the morning. The people of Guangdong transformed their dough with duck eggs and bamboo poles. The people of Shanxi used a carved blade to break through the limits of conventional tools. And the people of Wuhan reshaped time through pre-cooking and mixing noodles with sauce. But these three places represent only the tip of the iceberg on China's enormous noodle map. Why did this land never develop one single uniform kind of noodle? Because wheat crossed mountains and seas before taking root in radically different environments. And the people living on those different lands face completely different realities in their daily lives. Every seemingly ordinary bowl of noodles is simply the most practical solution people found for the environment in front of them. The next time you lift a steaming bowl of noodles, you will taste more than the aroma of wheat. You will taste the warmth of everyday life passed down from generation to generation across different lands. The story has only just begun.